ready, Joe? Go.
Hello. This is the Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Joe Barnhart, and with me is
Larry Rhodes. Today we're going to discuss abortion choice and women's rights. But first, I believe we have some announcements.
Yeah, first of all, it's a call-in show, so if you would notice the number, and I'm sure that some of you want to call in and help us out with this very difficult question. And then we have some announcements, so if you would get pen and paper, and we'll give you the email address and other things.
Do you want to address the fact that Heather was supposed to be on the show?
Yes, she was, and she had her horse didn't quite make it, and she went off the horse. But maybe we'll have her back on another program.
We wouldn't like to have the abortion rights show without a lady on the panel. But as it happens, at the last minute, Heather got hurt, and I had to come in to fill in for her.
Yeah, and she really had prepared for this. Mm-hmm. And her neck's in a race right now.
Yeah. Some of the announcements include happy hour with the Atheist Society of Knoxville. It will be a meetup tonight at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for food, drink, and conversation. You can find us by looking for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table.
Also, first and second Sunday mornings are information lectures and discussions, lively discussions with the Rationalists of East Tennessee, first and third Sunday mornings. Mm-hmm. And look that up on that. Mm-hmm.
And this Sunday, the second Sunday afternoon will be the 12 by 12, a one-room cabin off the grid, and Beyond the American Dream.
Okay. You want to go to some news now?
There's our websites. You can visit our websites if you have a chance and the inclination. In the news, got you starting here. If you'd like to go ahead and start on that.
Well, yeah, George Tiller was a man who was murdered. Acting as a church usher, killed by an anti-abortionist activist. We won't give his name, but he apparently thought he had the duty. I'd like to add some of these preachers had defined abortion as murder, and apparently people like Tiller thought that was their job to go around and executing people. The irony of it is he committed murder himself.
That gets me into another whole topic I don't want to get into right now, but preachers who instigate these type of actions, they don't have any personal responsibility, or they accept no personal responsibility for sending out people doing things like that, which is, I think, a flaw of our legal system. And I've put some web videos up on the web about that. You can look them up under Doubter 5 on YouTube if you'd like to see some. Mm-hmm. George Tiller studied in the University of Kansas School of Medicine from 63 to 67. Shortly thereafter, he held a medical internship with the United States Navy and served as a flight surgeon in Oakland, California in 69 and 70. And in 1970, he planned to start a dermatology residency. However, in 1970, his parents, sister, and brother-in-law were killed in an aircraft accident. In her will, his sister had requested that Tiller take care of her one-year-old son, and Tiller had intended to go back to Wichita to close up his family's practice and then go back to become a dermatologist.
Okay, well...
However, he quickly felt pressure to take over his father's family practice. Tiller's father had performed abortions at his practice, and after hearing about a woman who had died from an illegal abortion, Tiller stayed in Wichita to continue his father's practice. Dr. Tiller is one of the most recent of 4 doctors killed by people who want to substitute their judgment for the judgment of the women involved. Previously killed were Doctors Barnett Slepian, John Britton, and David Gunn. All 4 doctors were killed by people justifying their actions by Christian beliefs. And one thing that we have to remind the audience is, if we do outlaw abortions, the only kind of abortion you can get would be back alley abortions. And we would lose an awful lot of people, babies, and health care if that happened.
Yeah. And we want to make it clear, this is primarily to talk about choice. Some people will choose the route of abortion, and some won't. people on various religious sides on this differ in their approach, and I've had people who are atheists to have different views on this, and that's it's good to be in a country where people can have.
Right. And it should be stated up front that nobody wants abortion. I mean, even the pro-choice people don't want abortion. It's a last choice resort, generally to protect the life and the health of the mother or the child or both.
Yeah, that's why they're so strong in favor of family planning,
right?
Which is kind of strange. Many of the anti-abortion people, for some reason,
are also anti-contraceptive.
Yeah, which is strange. Fortunately, the people in the Catholic tradition and the Protestant tradition don't pay that much attention to the clergy on this issue, because the people have to raise and nurture these children. In fact, when I was in high school, my senior year in '49, I believe, it was '49, that I was reading a book by a Baptist minister, John R. Rice, an old fundamentalist, and he was arguing against birth control. And I read another one. I was very much influenced by these ministers, and another by a Lutheran minister, Walter A. Meyer, and if I remember correctly, his book, For Better Not For Worse, had many good things in it, but they were so anti-birth control.
Right. Well, there's two ways to grow your clergy: a horizontal method and a vertical method. Not your clergy, but your people in your pews. Make your church larger. The horizontal method is send out people into the streets and recruit off families from other churches or from other states or even other religions. That will get your parishioner numbers up. However, another way, the vertical way, is just to have more children. And one of the primary examples of that is Catholicism. By banning birth control, they know that they're going to get more and more children born into the church and raised by Catholic parents, and which will then accept the church and go farther. They can then almost guarantee that the church will grow.
Ironically, this president of the Southern Baptist Seminary, from which I graduated in '56, came out urging Baptist women to have more babies. And later, I think it was kind of interesting, he got a lot of criticism. He also came out in favor of adoption, which I think is far more moral. You've got the children already here. It seems to me adopting children already here is more conservative.
Right.
You conserve what we have rather than simply generating people because of some, I don't know. Traditionally, why would you think people, now this is, say, looking way back, why would people be opposed to birth control without religious reasons?
Right. Well, the thing about it is, if you look at it that way, like the Catholic Church and other churches, I don't mean to single them out, a lot of churches do this, but if you take the double whammy of no contraception, abstinence-only education, I count that as one, and an anti-abortion stance, then you're guaranteed that nobody's going to have abortion, nobody's going to practice birth control, and your church membership will go up. I mean, just voluminous.
Yeah. Now, to be fair to the churches, they do insist on, if you're not married, abstinence. And most of us, I mean, I think.
Well, they do, but how reliable is that? I mean, there's an old saying, priests can't resist the temptation of sex, even when they're in church and celibate, theoretically. But your teenager is supposed to be able to? Like he has more self-control?
Let's say that's our goal, to help kids do this. That's another program which we need to address, because it is a tough, if you're a parent, you don't want to have teenagers having sex. And certainly bringing children into the children
unwanted
having
or
children.
And that can't be taken care of.
And let's say abstinence is a real possibility.
Well, we know it works.
It certainly does, and it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you need a community and groups that are reinforcing to help encourage this.
Well,
and
yes,
some of the
but
churches,
it's also you cannot really expect it to be 100%.
No,
I mean,
you can't.
one or two slip-ups and your abstinence is gone. It's a very tough row to hoe. It's a hard one to keep.
Well, unfortunately, in our culture, with the television and the movies and the input, kids have.
Not to mention the free time that they have on their
Yeah.
hands.
Sometimes I think some of the TV programs and the movies are written by 14-year-old boys.
And the worst examples are on Fox News and Fox TV, excuse me, the channels that carry the most sex and violence and all that. To me, it seemed to be Fox channels, which is a very conservative, otherwise religiously based channel, looking at the news anchors and things that they have. But
Well, let's move now into this whole notion of pro-choice and pro-life.
Mm-hmm.
Let me suggest this. I had a teacher, a good teacher in college, in a course called Christian Doctrine. And he came up with this question. Suppose there were intelligent beings on other planets. What would our responsibility to them be? Now, he wasn't arguing there were or that there weren't. He was just saying, I mean, and this is what a good teacher does, is it gets you to thinking. But what he was suggesting, and it got me to thinking, and it took me a long time to put all this together, is that there is more to being a person than being a human being. In other words, to be, or let me turn it around, a fetus is a human being, a human fetus.
Mm-hmm.
Does that necessarily mean that a human fetus is a person? That's a question.
Well, when does it become a person?
And when does it become a person? And I want to get into this matter because I think that's very, it often is and not dealt with. It's just assumed.
Well, at this time, the United States legal system would assume that birth makes a person, a fetus, a person.
And that was part of the Jewish tradition, it seems to me. And
that's when they start having rights of their own, independent of other people.
Yeah, we don't think that a fetus has certain rights. Now, we'll come back to that aspect because we've got so many values to deal with on this, big important values. If there were angels, as many Christians hold to, then it's usually assumed angels are persons. They're not human, but they are. You wouldn't eat an angel, for example, the way you'd eat a cow. They have. So what I'm suggesting now is that personhood comes in. It is a process of development. It just doesn't come by magic. There's a passage in the book of Romans, the 9th chapter, in which Paul makes it clear that Jacob and Esau in the womb do nothing right or wrong. Now that suggests to me that he is saying they don't yet have a conscience. They are not developed. Now, what's interesting is how he deals with how others would deal with that on the notion of original sin.
That's what I was going to mention. When do they inherit the sin?
They popped out of the womb and
they inherit it. Yeah.
But the point is that if you're going to be using the Bible to quote this, I don't think you're going to be able to come up with a clear answer on when a person begins. I mean, you can pick and choose, as most people do in the Bible. But there's a passage there, if you're going to take Paul as a divine revelation, then he's making it quite clear, it seems to me, that this
is the point.
These twins are not what we would call persons yet. They are human. They're not kangaroos.
Right.
But they're not persons.
And they're not conscious yet.
They are not. They don't have what we would call consciousness or a conscience. Now, Would you say that a dog is a person?
No.
No, I wouldn't either. Now, dogs, as you know, are very loving sometimes, and you can have friends, but they are not persons. They can have
Sometimes we personify them.
We project it. Well, it's a good point. A dog can have a personality, but it's not a person.
No.
So what is it that makes a person a person? I want to deal with that.
Okay. Well, one would say humanity and being a part of the human race, or
Well, if there were other intelligent beings, they would qualify, but they wouldn't be human, you see. So I'm going to try to give a category.
you could even talk about number of chromosomes they have and all that.
Well, let me try this. Is one thing we can do, that dogs can do, is one we can, and birds too, we can express ourselves, and we can respond to signals.
Okay. We have a phone call. Would you like to take it
let's,
now?
let's do that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You're on Freethought Forum. May we have a name or nickname?
Well, hello, this is Faithless Forrest. I'm calling in. Sorry I can't be with you guys today.
Hi,
but
Faithless.
I heard you talking about, when does the baby become a person? And I guess I wanted to offer and ask you to, criticize pro and con. But if the Bible be true, don't we know that the breath that life comes with the first breath? There's passages that say the breath of life. So by evidence of the Bible, not that I believe Bible is something we should be using.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Does a dog have life?
Say again?
Does a dog have breath? Does a cow have breath?
Of course it does.
Not a person. Takes more than breath to make a person.
But it's
what we're dealing here with is what are the characteristics that make a person. It takes more than existence. It takes more than life.
Forrest may not have heard the question that we were discussing prior to his call, but he was aware that we're going to be talking about when life was coming into the world.
So what I'm saying is a person, like other creatures, can signal, they can express, but they can also make descriptions. And then they
have a communication. You're talking about a language.
Yeah, we're talking about language, and here is where a 4-year-old human person goes way beyond Rover, the dog, or a horse. Is a person can make descriptions. They can have what you might call one brain physiologist calls World 3, the world of art, language, and a person. Say a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old can project a future state and talk about it even if it doesn't exist.
Right.
A person can develop a stopping point with an instinct and reflect on it. Now this is a level that it's a process in stages. But so what I'm saying is that a fetus cannot do these things,
right?
Because
even a newborn.
They are. It takes time to be a person.
Did you have any input on that, Forrest? What we were talking about?
Well, sure. The point I was trying to make, though, is that the Bible, which I don't believe is a good tool to make these decisions, the Bible says something to the effect that that life is breath, and breath doesn't happen until a baby's been born. And so if the Bible is used as the guide for when life begins, there's no reason to assume that abortion is immoral, as evidenced by the Bible.
Right. So many people nowadays in the controversy are trying to give rights nowadays, pass laws to give rights to fetuses. I assume that's where you're going with this, that it would be kind of presumptuous to give human rights to an unborn child.
And what's more is it's non-biblical.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, the rights of the unborn child would conflict with the rights of the mother, or the human bearing the child.
And of course, in the original decision of Roe versus Wade, the justices in their write-up of the decision talked about a growing right of the fetus, and that that represents the fact that it is developing, and it is, but that it is when the fetus, when the baby is born, at that point, being born, it no longer is, its health and welfare is no longer tied up directly with the health and welfare of the mother.
Sure.
So once the umbilical cord is cut, then the mother's rights no longer can trump.
True. Going along with this, it says that reproductive right rests on the recognition of the basic right of all individuals to freely decide with the responsibility of number, spacing, and timing of their children. So this is the World Health Organization saying that the right really comes to the mother or to the parent of the child as to when they have a child. And if they inadvertently conceive one, they should still have the right, according to the World Health Organization, to be able to terminate that if they need to, and that's where we all agree. It's not something that you want to go out and say, hey, we've got nothing to do this weekend, let's go have an abortion. That's not the case. We're talking about in very serious health matters here.
I think there's where liberals and conservatives, I don't like dividing the world that way, they agree. We want to try to control.
Even pro-choice people feel that way, which is not recognized by the anti-choice people. Or
nobody's saying go out and just use abortion as just birth control.
Right.
Nobody's recommending that. Nobody in his right mind.
No way.
I mean, there are crazy people.
We certainly don't recognize it. Recognize that as a valid way of birth
Would
control.
you say then that that a baby once born could survive all its own? No. So.
Well, okay, guys, I'm going to clear the line, and I hope you get some more callers, especially some who might comment on, my assertion that the Bible says that until there's breath, there's no life.
Right.
Thanks all.
Okay, thank Forrest.
Speaking of the Bible, there is a passage in Proverbs, the 8th chapter of Proverbs. Train up a child in the way it should grow, or he should grow, so that it won't depart from it. And I think what's implied here is that a newborn, an infant, is not born with what we call character. And that's why the old Victorians were right to say that we build character. I mean, we sometimes...
Of course.
It's wrong simply to put down all Victorianism and say they had nothing important to say on this. They had something incredibly important to say. Character is built stage by stage, and conscience is built. An infant is not born with a conscience.
No.
If anybody's been around a 2-year-old, you can see, they have a long way to go. So what we may be suggesting here is personhood comes in stages. It takes a long time just for the brain after birth to grow.
Well, as you can see from you're talking about our objective morality, which we call laws. We have codified that into our laws. The 5-year-old doesn't have the same rights as a 15-year-old, and vice versa. As the person becomes more and more mature, hopefully they're more and more mature. They do grow up, but as they accumulate years, they also accumulate rights.
Yeah, we wouldn't give a driver's license to a 9-year-old.
No.
Or a gun.
No. Or give them the right to vote.
Right. So this being a person comes in stages, and I think in the womb it is not what we would call in the kingdom of personhood.
It's
now,
still part of the mother at that point.
Yeah. Now, if a mother is going to give birth to a child, then the mother has an obligation to take care of that child's health, and the father's obligation to help provide for that. Now, let's suggest. I think we've got a phone call. We'll wait on that.
We may have one in the works here. We don't know yet.
So I think we say that in our culture we have probably the majority of human beings believe the moral imperative of birth control, that it's wrong to bring children into the world just willy-nilly.
There's the phone call.
Yeah, let's see.
Okay. Welcome to Freethought Forum. May we have a name or nickname?
Slim.
Go.
Slim?
Go
Go
Slim.
ahead. May we have a question or comment?
Yeah, how y'all doing today?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Hey, what's on your mind?
Well,
Hello?
go ahead.
Hello,
Go
yes.
ahead.
Please turn off the TV or turn down the TV and just concentrate on the telephone. There's a lag in the broadcast, and it will be confusing. There's a definite lag.
Well, unfortunately,
Yeah. No, what you were getting to is the point where the less you have birth control or birth control education, reproductive sex education, the more possibility that you'll be needing abortions on down the road. And that's a problem that the religious right, let's say, has with it, in that they say that we shouldn't even talk about sex. Don't talk about contraceptives. Don't talk about anything but absolute abstinence, which is a non-workable solution, in my opinion, because the very strong urges of the young human, male and female, work directly in opposition to apposition, or abstinence. If you take some of the most secular nations in the world, the Scandinavian countries, Japan, some of the most enlightened countries in Europe, they practice and teach reproductive sex education, contraceptives, and have a very broad range of subjects that they can impart to their young. But if you take the most religious areas of the world, they don't even talk about it. They say, "Thou shalt not," and that's the end of it.
well, what's interesting is
And they end up having more abortions, was the last line I was going to say.
well, now let's take Italy, which is heavily Catholic. They practice birth control, if you can pardon the pun, religiously.
Yeah.
And the Pope practices birth control in his way. You see, and therefore the population is
Fairly
not
steady.
exploding in Italy.
Right.
Now they have learned simply at that point, while their priest helped them in various areas, this is an area in which they simply assume their priest doesn't have enough information,
Right.
and just is irrelevant in that respect. And they wisely, I think, have to say, well,
Really, go ahead.
well, there are other areas in which they say the priest has some authority, but not in this.
Yeah, like those who can't do teach. In this case, it's those who can't do preach. We're coming up on the mid-program break. I thought it might be a good time to go ahead and talk about that. Sponsor identification. The sponsor of the show are the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. We mentioned them at the beginning of the show. If you wanted to, you've got an area. It says, in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is jointly funded by them and individual contributions. You can send us feedback at the email address on the screen, freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. Do not wait. This is a call-in show, and we are live today, May 31st, 2011. The Atheist Society of Knoxville meets several times during the week, or during the month. We have an evening meetup for fun food and drink. As a matter of fact, we're going down to Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria after the show. We usually do every Tuesday. I'll be down there probably about 6:15. If you'd like to visit the Ask website or the RET website, we should have those up on the screen pretty shortly. The Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions of subjects of topical and timeless.
The other one, every atheist should know about the Bible, to be literate about the Bible.
It's
What's
surprising how much atheists know about the Bible. It really is.
And the evolutionary history of flowers, and thinking rationally about climate change, and the God Delusion, other books, the American Age of Unreason, and so forth.
All right. I always like to add.
Is this a phone call we've got coming in?
He's still screening it,
Okay.
but I always like to add
Here we go.
the Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan. It's not on the list up there.
Oh, that's too bad. It should be. Yeah, it's a good book.
You're on Freethought Forum. May we have a name or a nickname?
Grunty.
Go ahead, please.
What was your name? I'm sorry. Hello?
What's y'all thought on abortion?
Oh, okay.
We're against it, but we're for the rights of the woman and to have that decision of her own to make.
Okay, let me put this. There are cases in which not to have an abortion might be as immoral as having an abortion. For example, there are families in which bringing a child into that family would be so much hardship on the rest of the family. And we've got to forget, mothers are part of the family. We forget sometimes. We think
That's
they're
so
just
true.
And furthermore, the problem is that there are children already born who need to be adopted. Now, I must admit on that some governments want to make a business out of this, out of the adoption, and charge outrageous prices, it seems to me. Now, both my wife and I adopted here in America, and we paid money because the woman had to have medical care and nurse care,
Well, I can understand
and the
that.
doctors had to be paid,
Yeah.
and that's understandable. And the agency had to be paid.
Yeah, I can understand that, but to charge exorbitant fees just for the sake of charging fees is not a...
That's criminal, in my opinion.
I would think
and
it
some
would be.
governments are criminal at using kids that way.
If the caller is still watching, he's hung up, but we made the point a little earlier that nobody really wants abortion. Even the pro-choice people don't like and don't want abortion. It's a last choice when it comes down to the life of the mother or the health of the child or either or both.
We're pro-family planning.
Yes.
Every kid should be planned for in so much as possible.
It's generally the religious right make it such a black and white issue, but it's anything but black and white. There's so many things that have to be considered when you're thinking about bringing a child into the world.
Yeah, I would argue our position on this is very conservative. I mean, a child is here. Once they're born, we should conserve in every way possible. And that's why school teachers, I want to say to these kindergarten teachers and those nurses and doctors and others who nurture the child, help the mother, they're so crucial.
And we haven't even touched on population growth. When I was a child, which admittedly was a while ago, the population of the Earth was 4 billion people. It's now 6 billion people, and that's in one lifetime. The people who are living now can expect the same exponential growth in population. It may very well be 9 or 10 billion by the time my nephew gets to my age. And
the pollution in China, I'm told, is just atrocious.
Yeah.
There's so many.
Yeah, it doesn't grow at a special graph. It grows in an exponential rate. Okay, we have another call.
Go ahead.
You're on Freethought Forum. May we have a name or nickname?
Yes, my name's Michelle.
Hello, Michelle. I'm glad you called in. We needed a female perspective.
Good, yeah.
Did you have a question or comment?
I have a comment. I want to thank you so much for having the courage to have this show on. I've been an atheist ever since I was probably 3. My parents literally tried to beat religion into me, and even from a young age, I could tell it was BS.
Yeah. I was afraid I didn't have that insight when I was very young, but I can appreciate someone who does.
When I went to high school, I mean, it was terrible. I live in Cotton County, so you can imagine. When I announced in high school, and the teachers up here are mainly very religious teachers, and they want to push it off on everyone. They even went so far as to have prayer in school, and I'm 45 years old, and, it was then outlawed then.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Have you heard from any of the children going to the schools up there now? Are they still having prayer?
The teachers still push religion off on them. Matter of fact, I homeschool both my children so they don't have to deal with it.
Okay.
No, I Cotton County, I have very warm feelings for because I had some wonderful relatives there. But I also had, like all counties, you have a mixture, but I have very warm feelings. I had a relative in Cott County who took the book of Revelation and parts of that part of the Bible and thought the end of the world was, they thought Mussolini was going to be the Antichrist.
Antichrist. There's always one in every generation.
But my grandmother, I don't ever remember her pushing religion. She just practiced the golden rule.
Yeah, my mother was the same way.
Let me read a passage from Timothy. Since a woman has called, and I think we owe the women this. Here is part of the background, I think, for some of these preachers. Now, I want to say some, because a lot of ministers I know are very much opposed to fundamentalism, very much opposed so, and they are very enlightened people.
Cool.
And here is a passage that some of the more fundamentalists quote: "Let a woman learn in silence with full submission. I permit no woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She is to keep silent." Now,
oh yeah, that sounds about like the way.
Familiar? Mm-hmm. Now, what's the so-called logic of this? Well, here is apparently the male writer.
Logic. It's just
let me give you what he thinks is a logic, and then you can see it's pretty pathetic. For Adam was first formed, then Eve.
So they're basing all of the taking away of the rights of the woman on a myth or a legend.
Well, even if you took it literally, that there was Adam first, that has no logic
Nothing to it.
Listen to this. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived. I mean, it gets worse, and became the aggressor. Now,
What's your excuse on that? I'm just wondering. I'm being facetious, of course.
well,
Did you have any comment or question or anything on the topic that we're talking about today, abortion and women's rights?
Well, personally, I don't believe in abortion. I believe that life starts from the time the sperm and the egg unite.
how'd you find that out, by the way?
Oh, science.
No, you didn't. That's a lot. Now, let's back up. Would you agree that your egg is not pebbles? It's not inorganic. It's organic. It's life. It's not pebbles.
Well,
go ahead.
An egg itself does not form a child until it unites with a sperm.
Okay, now, when the sperm and the egg come together, does that make a person?
In my opinion, it starts life.
Well, it starts live. Well, actually, it doesn't start live. It's already before that. It's a new stage of life. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, now we're talking about stages. And in the womb, there are going to be a lot of stages. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Outside the womb, the brain is still growing. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, so all we're saying is, at least all I'm saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'm saying that in the stage of personhood, that doesn't come until after birth. But life comes even before conception.
Well,
It's a different stage of life.
Every cell in your body is life.
Right.
It can be cloned into a person if necessary. But, yeah, I think we were talking a little bit earlier about everybody really agreeing that they're against abortion. Even we are against abortion. But we agree.
I mean, there are certain cases like incest, rape.
So you're one of the people I'm talking about. You're against abortion, but you're for a woman's right to be able to make that decision about her own body and her own situation.
Well, now, let's not put in words in her mouth.
Oh, I thought that's what she was saying.
You're not putting words in my mouth. I totally agree with that.
Let me ask you this. Suppose a person has not been raped and it's not incest, but she's got 4 kids, and she says enough is enough. And she didn't plan this. This just simply
an accident.
The contraceptive didn't work. What do you think?
I could understand in a case like that. Because, I mean, how many people can afford to raise 5 kids? We do good with 2.
Right.
My father worked 7 days a week up until he was 65 with 4 kids.
There's life, and then there's quality of life.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Have you got other comments? I appreciate you calling in. We do.
No, I just really want to thank you all for
Sure.
having the
Is this
show.
the first time you've caught our program?
Oh no, I've watched it ever since I
Okay.
found it on. This is
Okay,
the
great.
first time I've called in.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Tell your friends.
Well, thank you, and
Okay.
I'm glad to have new friends.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. We were talking about Atheist Society in Knoxville and rationalists, and let me finish up this quote on the World Health Organization. It says that they believe that the reproductive rights rest on the parents to freely decide as individual humans and responsible adults in our world. To decide on the spacing, timing of the children, have information and the means to do so, and the right to obtain the highest standard of sexual and reproductive health and maintain that. They also include the right of all of us to make decisions concerning reproduction free of discrimination, coercion, and violence. And of course, we're facing some of those kinds of problems in America today.
We need more education in so many. I want to pay respect to a high school teacher I had. We called the course Health. It was in the old Knoxville High School.
Yeah.
And now she did emphasize abstinence, and I'm glad. Because there are other problems with teenagers having sex. I don't care what age.
Right.
And it was a good course and a sane course. And then when I got to Carson Newman College, I had a teacher who had a course called Marriage and the Family. And that opened up a whole new way of looking at the marriage relationship and also the sexual relationship, that sex is not just for reproduction and it's not just a Ferris wheel ride. It's a human relationship.
Yeah. It's part of the human relationship that builds the relationship.
Builds a relationship. And that opened up. And when I was about to get married, I had told a woman that I had seriously wanted to marry, that I thought we should have 6 kids. Now, can you believe this? Because I'd been reading these ministers, these preachers, and they had convinced me birth control was bad in producing kids. She wisely sent me intelligent literature and let me educate myself so that we got married. And she helped me to realize we have plans. And if we're going to carry out my career and her career, so that we can eventually raise children intelligently, we can't just be reproduction machines.
Such is the value of the give and take of a marriage.
That was your point earlier, the quality of human.
Right. Now, abstinence, I put down abstinence and it's just not workable. But I want to take part of that back and say that abstinence is a good part of any reproductive health system or birth control system. You can't have sex willy-nilly, left and right, and practice good reproductive health. It's got to have some periods in there when you do abstain, particularly when you're a teenager and not ready to get married. And sometimes even after you're married, when you haven't built a home yet or haven't found the place where you want to be to raise the children. And like you were saying, it's more than just children themselves, too. There are also STDs and problems that you can get into from that venue.
Yeah, we are biologically ready for sex in the narrow sense of the word long before
in the early teens.
We are emotionally and economically and others ready for it.
Right.
In fact, for generations, children were married at the age of 13, 14, and 15.
But the life expectancy back then was maybe 50, or 45 or 50. We're talking Middle Ages.
And when they said on the marriage vow, love, honor, and obey, part of the reason for that, I think, is these older, now they weren't necessarily, although they weren't old men, but say a 25-year-old might marry a
13,
14, 15. And obey was what you ask of a child. These were children.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, we rightly would call this statutory rape, as it should be. But these women, young women, were looked upon primarily.
And I'm sad to say it's still going on in certain parts of the world
Certain
today.
parts of the world, they are for breeding, and they are not treated as persons. The irony of some of these preachers, they want to treat the fetus as a person and forget about the woman as a person.
Yeah, it's true.
And that is at least inconsistency, if not out and out hypocrisy. It's certainly inconsistency.
It's true.
Let's talk about the social womb, if we've got time.
Okay.
Do you have something?
We have another 13 minutes. This is a call-in show. We have the call-in number is 215-2288, and we have time for another call or two, if you'd like to. In the meantime, we're going to talk about the social womb.
The social womb, okay.
It's a new concept for me.
Some woman pointed out something that I thought was kind of interesting. A baby doesn't come into the world like a pickup truck off the assembly line. And boy, that's insightful, you know. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a family. It takes a community.
It does take a community.
And there are a lot of people who have no children who nevertheless make enormous contributions.
Like me for my home taxes,
They
go
make-
to support the schools. And the
But
roads.
there used to be a lot of teachers who had no children, and they had many kids, and they are blessings to a community.
Right.
And the social womb, this is a phrase I borrowed from my wife,
Okay.
who was a licensed professional counselor for years. Her view is, and she's dead right, is that you have the biological womb in which the baby is growing physically and emotionally in other ways. And then outside, the baby is still growing the same way.
You know about the community
The
that
community
nurtures the child.
is nurturing the child, and what goes in like sounds into the ears and into the and stroking the arms and cuddling and picking them up when they fall. All of that feeds into the brain,
Sure.
and that's part of the emotional, moral,
Nurture.
physical. In fact, if you left a child in a corner and never touched it and never talked with it and simply fed it, it would physically die. You know, they have to have this. We are social creatures, so it's the physical womb, and it's more. Even that is more than physical. The emotional, and then the womb. And here's where the fathers come in. Now, and aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters and next door neighbors,
Yeah.
they help turn this newborn, in my opinion, into a person slowly, step by step.
To a viable member of society.
To a viable, the word responsibility is an interesting word. It's the ability to respond. And an infant cannot respond to certain cues. Part of what a conscience is the ability to respond to certain language cues that they can't do until they learn the language.
Right. Well, the brain is still developing. A lot of its synapses and a lot of its cortical convolutions and protective sheaths around the synapses for 2 or 3 years after it's born.
Exactly.
And then, of course, the process goes on after that into adulthood. I used to kid my nephew. I said, you're 14 years old. You think you're pretty smart. But as compared to where you will be in another 10 years, you're best bet at like a retarded adult. You may not realize it, but you don't have your facilities yet. You're not at the point where you can be a viable, functioning citizen.
I learned that the hard way, trying to take over my dad's business for a day.
Yeah. Okay, we have another call coming in. Welcome to Freethought Forum. May we have a name or a nickname?
JB.
JB.
How are you doing today, fellas?
Doing fine. Do you have a question or comment?
Well, yes, I do. Just very quickly. Actually, I want to start a discussion which will take a longer, but the time is short today. And I'll ask this first question, then I'm going to go to my second point. would you consider yourselves to be rationalists or empiricists? Don't answer me now. I won't think about that because I'll talk about that next week. You'll be on next week at the same time, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. My question is this. One of my concerns about this whole issue about, by the way, we're saying if a baby is in an aquatic environment, it's not a person. It takes its first breath and is separated from the umbilical cord. By definition, that first breath makes it a person. Is that correct?
No.
Well,
that depends on whose view you hold.
You're talking about legal view.
I don't.
Then let's just move on. I don't want to...
Legally, yeah. And
my problem is this. I see a problem that the state can make determinations about viability. This is the issue about viability and trimesters and all that. But in any event,
of necessity.
Some cases the state can make an argument, like in the Scott Peterson case, that an unborn baby was a person, and that second death gave a special circumstance in that man murdered his wife and baby. Or a young woman can be pregnant and commit a crime, and the crime she's charged with in this wreck after chasing the police, this unborn child was injured. So the state can make an interest on this and can declare an unborn child a person based on its own interest, and that disturbs me somewhat because technically you would think that the mother could say child. State reserves the right to make these judgments, and for me, how do you feel about that?
Okay, and that's one reason why I think it's important to establish when personhood begins. It is in the process and doesn't develop until I would say somewhere, give or take a few months, around the age of 2.
I guess my question: an unborn child can be called a person by the state for their own interest.
Okay, let me do this.
The mother.
Let me do this. I would say legally we probably should have a buffer zone. Now, let me explain by buffer zone.
Buffer zone.
Yeah. We can't precisely after birth for every infant know when it moves into personhood. We can have a range.
Some never do.
But since the infant has now been born, it's not an impingement on the mother's body. That's what
I understand that. I was asking a legal question about the state's interest.
Okay, now it is in the interest of the community, not the state, the community, I would argue, to go ahead and declare the infant as a person and treat it as if it were a person insofar as possible for 2 reasons. Because we don't know precisely after birth where to draw the line. The second, more important reason is that that's the way you turn the infant into a person. You talk with it.
You're making a classical argument. I agree. But when the state declares the child, that knowledge of the mother's will or her determination of the baby, a woman may say it's not a baby and have an abortion, and if the young woman's in a wreck and the baby's injured and they consider she commits a crime because the baby's injured, she may say it's not a baby. They say, oh, it is a baby.
Well,
it's that state interest I don't understand.
If it's in the womb, I would argue it is not a person.
And yet many people have been prosecuted, including Peterson, on the basis of the death of a second child, which gave him, or his child, unborn child, which gave a special circumstance. And a lot of young black women are prosecuted on the basis of injuring an unborn child with crack babies and all this. And it seems to be a sort of a state interest, which is kind of disturbing to me.
Okay, let me argue this.
Yes.
Because you have many values involved here.
Talking about the gray area.
If a mother is going to choose to have a baby, then she has a moral right to take care of that baby.
How do you know if at the time of the wreck the woman could change her mind and say, well, it's not a baby?
Well, we're not talking about a wreck right now.
I'm talking about this moral interest of the state. Very clearly, back to this issue. If the state determines a child as a child by its own interest,
forget the state right now. We're talking about.
I can't forget the state because they're part
That's why I said right now.
Okay.
Let's get to the moral issue, because the moral issue is
go ahead.
Is before you get to the state. This child, once it's born, and if we are treating it as if it were a person, then we have a moral obligation to abide by our commitment to personhood.
I agree completely. Are you saying that extends back, but prior to birth?
No.
The state interest?
No, not unless. No, I don't. I'm saying if it's not born, it's not a person.
Well, these children weren't born. The cases I've given you, children were not born, and they were not so-called viable, and yet they were treated as persons by the state for state interest. And I guess that's I understand these moral questions about viability in person, but when the state sets an interest for its own interest, prosecuting people, And then in one case, but in another case, a woman can make a judgment not a child. That's my confusion on the issue.
I'm confused on it too. I really haven't given it that much,
enough, thank you.
that much thought.
Okay, rational empiricists. Let's talk about that next week. Thanks, fellas.
We'll do the rationalist thing. Is if you're going to be a reasonable person, you're going to be both a rationalist and an empiricist.
Yeah.
You can't divide.
Well, you can be irrationally empirical.
No, you can't. If you're going to be empirical, you have to be.
I don't know.
Empirical means you simply let's say you got a theory or a conjecture, and you're going to try to test it out, and that's empirical. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have any theories, then you can't even be empirical.
Okay. That's another area I haven't given much thought to. It's just the difference between the two concepts on that one. But I'll go with yours on this for the time being. It's
I like that.
3 minutes left in the show. 215-2288. We could squeeze in one more caller. Did you have anything else that you hadn't covered?
This caller had a very interesting point, and I didn't mean to cut him off on this because we had, like a lot of these issues, you have several values you can try to balance out. Mm-hmm. And you don't want the state stepping in and declaring a fetus a person, therefore prosecuting the mother, although there are some thugs who do this. Yeah. And I say thugs because that's what they're doing, putting these people in jail.
But then again, you don't want you want to try to protect a child from an irresponsible mother.
Exactly.
At the same
because if that child, if that babe in the womb is going to become a person, then what you do to that child while it's in the womb, that's going to affect how it's going to be as a person.
That's a very tough question. It's something I haven't wrestled with yet. And it's a good thing I'm not in a position that I have to pass laws on that. But some people are in that position right now. We have one more call. We have about 2 minutes left in the show. We'll try to take it very quickly. Welcome to Freethought Forum. You're on. May we have a name or a nickname?
My name is Marcia.
Marcia, did you have any questions or comments?
Well, I was listening to you talk about women's rights and abortion, and you said that the baby wasn't a person. Mm-hmm. So, and it doesn't become a person until it comes out of the womb, correct?
Yeah, this is very strict,
that's
strict
what we're
language.
Talking about.
Yeah,
we're discussing that.
It's a human being.
Yeah, because it has a heartbeat and brain waves 6 weeks after conception.
Yeah, it's life. It's not death. It's life.
The very worst type of abortion that everybody is against is late-term abortion. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary to preserve the life of the mother. Is that what you were talking about?
Well, that's extremely rare. Most of the time, abortion is for birth control.
Sure.
It's because
we don't know that.
I don't know about that.
We don't know that to be the case.
I would think.
Well, I've had an abortion, so I know what I'm talking about.
Well, you know, in that instance, you would.
But that's not empirical just to have one instance.
Right.
You know, that's not very good thinking just to have one case. You know that.
Yeah.
Well, that's true, but I've talked to other women that have too. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, it's just because they feel they can't take care of the child.
Well, you got about 20 seconds left.
And
that might be a good reason not to have.
Abortion hurts women.
Let me ask you this. If you can't take care of a child, why should you have one? I mean, think of it from the child's point of view, not yours, the child's point of view.
There's other ways. I mean, you can put the child up for adoption. There's plenty of people that want children.
Do you think that the state should have the right to tell you to have your kid or not?
Should the state have the right?
Yeah.
Well, there's a moral issue there with your children, you know, with having a child.
You're skirting the issue, but
that's good. That's good, though. That's a moral issue. Good.
Because, like I said, I've had one, and I wasn't a Christian, so, you know, it wasn't that.
Okay. We're going to have to close. I'm sorry. We're down to just 8 seconds left.
Yeah, we are sorry because I wish maybe we'll have another program because they were good points.